Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. This is just a sound check from me, so you can ignore this, and I'll be back with myself and Joe in just under 10 minutes. Thanks. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, where we're going to have a very special guest, Joe McNally, who I shall introduce very shortly. He's sitting over in the USA, of course, while I'm in Europe, but fortunately, thanks to the power of the internet, we can join up together. Now, before we get to Joe, I've just realised my light isn't on, so I'm sitting in the dark. There we go, that's better. Before we get to Joe, just a couple of notes about the stream today. So we're going out in our webinar room, and we're also going out on YouTube and Facebook. So hello to people on YouTube and Facebook as well. Just a couple of housekeeping things to mention at the moment. As usual, we have a maximum of 60 minutes today. So normally if it's myself and a guest and Joe in particular, we're probably going to overrun that, but we'll do our best to keep it around 60 minutes. We are recording this as well, so if you miss anything or want to review again, you can just pick it up immediately on YouTube once we've finished as well. Now, if you're sitting in the webinar room and you want to ask a question, it's much better if you pop it in the Q&A tab. It just keeps it separate from the main chat. And there's also a couple of my colleagues helping out in the webinar room and also on YouTube and Facebook as well. If you want to hide the chat, then you can do so just by clicking that little arrow in the top right hand corner, and then that will just give you a bit more screen real estate. So let's go over to, let's see if we can find myself and Joe full screen. Hi Joe, how you doing?
Hey David, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Hello to everybody.
Yep, so we've got a good crowd today, I'm sure. As I said, don't be shy, everyone who's watching and listening. Feel free to ask your questions on today's subject. And if someone mysterious answers it in the background, that's, as I said, my colleagues helping us out in the background. So today, Joe, our title is Impossible Pictures, am I right?
Yes. Little, mildly, as I said on my blog, mildly hyperbolic, but you know, the array of pictures we're going to show today are either kind of hard to get or hard to make on certain levels, and we'll talk through the thought process. Excellent,
brilliant. Well, I'm going to bring up your screen, so we're seeing us and your screen visible now. So you've prepared a lot for it today, which is great, and as we discussed in the background, we're going to talk about the process behind the pictures, the level of planning that you go into as well, which is quite astonishing, and also a couple of little speed edits in Capture One as well, and that should bring us nicely to an hour, I believe. So over to you, and I shall keep an eye on questions and just interrupt you every now and then and fire a few questions at you too.
Yeah, absolutely. Questions are welcome. And I am, you know, an open book about this. There's no real mysteries about, you know, success or failure as a photographer. It's a process, you know. It's we work at it, we strive at it endlessly. For whatever reason, it sort of fell to me during the course of my assigning career to be thrown some curves, some complex stuff.
I'm sure.
And I've made a bit of a joke about it before, and that, you know, I was, you know, as my upbringing and or whatever, you know, that I was you know, happily acquainted with the whole notion of distress or pain, or editors, you know, sort of looked at me and said, well, he can do this. He seems to be a patient sort of guy, and he doesn't get rattled. And so they threw me, you know, kind of the kitchen sink of things. For a bit there, you know, I was kind of a go-to problem solver at the National Geographic. They would throw me stories that literally sort of, you know, were either a hodgepodge of things, or maybe nobody else even wanted to do.
No one else would go near it. Yeah.
I was happy for the work, you know. But before I kick off, just like very briefly, just want to thank Capture One for, you know, this opportunity, and also in particular David. David is a wonderful teacher, and I have great respect for good teachers. He's really helped me establish myself and a bit with this program, and I'll be absolutely truthful and modest about that. I have just kind of really on the road here. I'm getting better at this, and I'll never be a professional retoucher. That's not what I'm good at. But the beautiful thing about this program is that it's understandable to me. Whereas in the world of post-production, I had always felt like I was immediately drowning,
Right.
or being educated by folks who seemed determined to confuse me rather than enlighten me. David is the opposite of that, and Capture One for me is an intuitive tool, and it's become a real kind of powerful element of what I'm doing here in the studio during this pandemic, which is rummaging through my archive, as I suspect a lot of us are. And just also a note on that, during this very stressful time, I hope everybody is safe and well, and all their families and loved ones are the same. So,
and as we discussed, this is probably the longest single period you've actually been in the USA for quite a number of years, I guess.
this is the longest I've been off an airplane since my 20s. So
Wow.
we're looking at 40 years. And, again, a very small personal silver lining for me in the midst of all this distress has been I've been able to be home with my wife, which is wonderful, learn a few things, and administer the studio pretty much on my own. We have our studio manager still with us. Annie does our social media marketing, but our 10-year crew chief fell in love, got engaged, and headed south to Virginia. So I'm alone here in the studio pretty much.
We've already had a comment that someone said Annie needs to give you a haircut. So, but as you said to me, she likes the style, right?
Yes, my hair is longer than it's been since I was in college, and I haven't had a haircut in 2020.
Yeah.
And I fully acknowledge I'm pretty shaggy right now, but the thing is, Annie does like it long, and she says, I'm not going to give you a haircut. And right now, I'm not going to bother going to a barber. So it's almost become kind of a pandemic objective here. Maybe I'll finally get a haircut when we kind of get out of the woods. We'll see.
Well, fortunately, I don't have that problem, so there we go.
All right. So just as a preamble, and as David said, questions are welcome. Any and all, I'm happy to discuss any level of the approach here. I'm going to rattle through some stuff that's, as I said, there's pictures here that are hard to get, but once you get to the place where you can make it, they're actually sort of simple to make. And then there's pictures that are difficult to make. But I'll start off with a little bit of kind of background and history. Fortunately, I grew up at a time where magazines had money to burn. And this was Sports Illustrated. I lit this whole stadium with hot lights and a movie truck, and we simulated the action for the ball players. And Sports Illustrated didn't even blink an eye at this kind of a production back in the day. This was, he was a legendary defensive ball player. I've said this before when I've shown this picture. It looked like he was playing shortstop from 5 different positions at once. So I reflected him in 5 different mirrors. Ozzie Smith, the Wizard of Oz. And this was a very typical scene. What you see right here, that's Howard Simmons, who went on to a terrific career as a daily news photographer in New York City. But that kind of, grip equipment and lighting and this and that and staging, very typical for the time of the day. Shooting chrome, shooting, transparency film that was extremely unforgiving. Okay, the malleability of digital at this point is a great gift to all of us. The thing I've always pushed myself to do is get a camera someplace where people can't go. So this is an easy picture to make. It's a tough picture to get. It's hard to get to these places. So this was kind of a bit of my history starting off where people sort of maybe noticed me in the assigning world like, okay, this guy's sort of willing to go and do X, Y, Z. I don't think I've ever shown this picture before. So here we go. That's me in a long time ago. This was climbing the original trade centers. As you can see, old school, no harnesses, just a little safety belt that would have broken your back if you had fallen.
No, not really much use, no.
No. And backseat in an F-16. These are the kind of things that I was given the opportunity to do. And there's a tremendous responsibility about all of this because you don't get a chance like this too often and you don't want to fail. But here, this is, of all things, a D2H camera. Right. And you can see how flat it is, David, and all of that. And here's the great gift to me of Capture One. It took me 5 minutes to do that. And that is, it wasn't a terrific lens, it wasn't great resolution, it's an older photograph, and I pulled it out of my files. Again, it's not a photograph I see or show hardly ever. but I thought for tonight or today, showing this kind of material, like, yeah, this is quote unquote impossible. Not really, but it's hard to do. It's hard to get. It's hard to get the opportunity. And once you get the opportunity, you don't want to fail. But correlating this with Capture One, I was able to take this out of my archives literally a couple days ago, and it literally took me 5 minutes to do this. And I will again be the first one to be self-effacing about this. For folks who really live very thoroughly in the post-production world and are really, really familiar with all of the tools, this is probably child's play to them. But for me, especially if you're out there as a photographer now working on your own or in your own studio or going through your archive, this to me is just a fantastic facilitator of the work at hand. So be that as it may, if you're willing to go here, you can get this. If you are willing to go here, you can shoot this. That's the top of the Burj Khalifa. You have to really imagine yourself into a photograph. So this is Michelle Yeoh, the actress from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and I needed to show her relative to Hollywood as a stunt woman. And so that was the picture that we came up with there. Again, easy picture to make, very hard picture to sell to your editor and then garner the money for it. And then, of course, there's the corollary, David, as always. When you spend a lot of a magazine's money, you better not screw it up.
Yeah, I guess that's the key, isn't it? If you have the opportunity to go to these places, have these jobs, be with these kinds of people, rent a helicopter, then you have to deliver.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll move quite quickly through these because these are just things that you have part of, and I'll emphasize this a couple of times during the course of the hour here. Basically, being a photographer to a great degree is about confidence. Mm-hmm. I don't care if you're a wedding shooter. Weddings terrify me, quite frankly, or a portrait shooter, a sports shooter, magazine shooter, whatever you might be. Confidence is an essential kind of piece of kit that you have to have with you all the time. This was a long time to negotiate this, to get on board. This is Russia in the zero-G plane. I won't go into the kind of machinations that went on behind the scenes so much, but I can tell you this: to get on board this plane, I walked up to my, I'm sure he was a former, probably a big shot with the KGB or something like that. He was my contact at Star City. Right. And the things that you do to get a photograph, I reached into my pocket and I pulled out $10,000 in cash. And I gave it to him on the runway. He stuffed it in his pocket and he looked at the pilots and he gave him the order to spin the props. And that's how I got on board. That's
the one that does the high climb and then dive and so on for weightlessness, yeah?
Yes. Yeah. And I think I've shown that picture a number of times, and I always admit this. I was sick beyond measure. I was, I don't know, I threw up maybe 20, 30, 40 times. Wow. And in a weightless environment.
Yeah, that's not a good mix. Yeah.
So I unzipped my flight suit and I started throwing up inside my shirt, which is probably too much information. But, at the end of it, I finally got that picture. Mike Lopez Alegria, American astronaut, is holding on to my ankles as I floated to the ceiling. That's right. Dave Wolf in the center of the picture. And Sergei Krikalev, who's a hero of the former Soviet space program, up there flying around. And I'm throwing up into my eyepiece as I'm shooting this. And Mike is holding on to me. And when we all collapsed at the end of it, one of the astronauts came over to me and said, "Joe, you just did something very Russian." I said, "What's that?" He goes, "You suffered." And you got the photograph. And sure enough, all the Russian staff guys on board the plane were wonderful. They took me out for drinks later and patted me on the back, and they were laughing, at my distress. But, when you go through something like this,
I'm sure they've all been through it. Yeah.
It's a bonding,
Question from Ian, which was kind of timely with some of these more historical shoots. So without the blessing of digital and instant review, So how did you guarantee the exposures, and did you ever have any reshoots that you needed to do because of, just general errors of not being able to see the instant result that we're kind of blessed with today, really?
It is a blessing what we have today. I shot this on Kodachrome, flash on camera. I had no idea. I was guessing, and made reasonable guesses. There was a lot of uncertainty in the age of film, to be sure. It translated into a pretty solid base of technical approach and knowledge that I draw on now, even though I am getting those results, as we all do. One of the things when I teach sometimes, occasionally, and the class hates it when I do this, is I put black gaffer tape on their LCDs and tell them just go shoot for the day without ever seeing what they're getting.
Right.
Develop a little bit of an intuitive feel for exposure and light and that kind of thing. So yes, without review, there were a lot more guesswork, a lot of kind of, seat of the pants sort of solutions. Polaroid, of course, if you were in a controlled situation, you could use Polaroid. Polaroid was a great tool, but it did not approach the detail or color palette of the film you were actually shooting. So you had to make that interpolation as well. Yeah. So you learn to be, I grew up as a newspaper wire service photographer, so I learned to kind of like tap dance my way through uncertain situations and move relatively quickly. I have a couple of mistakes in here. I'll show you. I mean, mistakes were, again, right in your kit bag always. The flawless shoot was a rare thing indeed, if there ever has been such a thing. So you got used to making mistakes, and you gritted your teeth, and you kept learning from them. And that was the age I came out of.
Yeah, and of course we never knew what was coming in terms of digital. So I'm old enough to have shot with film, and I don't miss it at all, to be honest. And of course we didn't know any better. There was no such thing as instant review, except for Polaroid, which, as you say, was kind of pretty crude. So we didn't know any better, really. So that was half of the nerve-wracking pleasure of pulling out film from development and seeing if you hadn't screwed it up or not.
True. I mean, I remember going to a lecture from Emery Christoph, a very famous National Geographic photographer, and this was like, I don't know, maybe 90-ish or something like that. And at the podium, he held up a roll of Kodachrome, and he looked at the audience and he said, "In your lifetime, this is gone." Yeah. And I was in the back of the room, this cocky kid, know-it-all, and I was like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about, And, things overtake. Technology moves fast. This is a digital shot. Thankfully, I'm up on National Geographic sent me to do story on the power grid of the United States. And so this is how I went to work for a week. You'd fly up onto the power towers on the outside of a helicopter and get dropped off on what they call the goat tip. And then I'd spend the day rattling around the towers. So this, again, easy picture to make, hard picture to get to, but it enabled you, that's where the pictures lived. The pictures were up on the towers where the crews were working. So I had to go there. That's the surrender you make, really, when you take a job, when you say yes. Where are the pictures? Well, wherever they are, that's where I'm going. Even if I'm not, particularly, I'm not a lineman. I'm not comfortable up there at all. I was older than most of those guys, but the pictures live there, so that's where you go. Moving along into, starting to get into that's kind of like a little bit of rough background of things, you rattle around in this, but starting to do, flash work. This is a lucky photograph. This is a single speed light, Nikon SB24, and it ran as the lead to a story that I worked on for a year for the National Geographic. And it's a completely lucky frame. This is Kodachrome 200, and out of 36 exposures, this was the only sharp frame. It's 30-second exposure. I'm pouring dry ice down the subject's forehead so you can see the laser, because the laser is too weak to be seen by the naked eye unless it hits particulate matter. And this really kind of got me going into the sense of like lighting and working with and seeing sort of the unseeable. Like, how can I Geographic started throwing me science stories. Science is not everybody's, backyard.
Right.
How do I make science interesting? These astronomers, this is lit with small flash, little small flashes, keying each one of them, and then I sprayed the whole set with a couple of Kodak carousel projectors that had images of space on it. And that's bits and pieces of seamless paper in the background. I mean, it's almost embarrassing how rough I did some of this stuff. Pre-digital, no post-production. That's John Glenn. When he returned to space, I noticed they were doing bone scans of him because he was 78 years old. So I shot the bone scan off the computer screen. I asked the senator to come into the studio, and then I projected his bones onto his flight suit. And the senator was such a good guy, he was willing to do it with me.
Cool.
And and Geographic ran it. I mean, this, is a long exposure at night. That's my assistant on the job in the original photograph. And then I closed all the shutters. And the day before, I had made a wood cutout of him.
Right.
I traced his frame on a piece of plywood, and then I jigsawed it out, spray painted it black, and I put it out there in the desert, and that's what stayed. That wood cutout is what stayed in the desert all night. I slept in a Ford Explorer. I ran 6 cameras, and I set my wristwatch alarm for every hour. And that's your bracket when you're shooting star trails. So every hour I'd wake up and I'd shut down a camera, go back in and sleep, shut down a camera. I mean, you have to have the mindset that you're going to go after this. Once you say yes and say you can do it, you have to be like a dog with a bone. This, again, never going to happen again. Sports Illustrated basically is gone as a magazine. Sports Illustrated spent $40,000 on this picture.
Yeah, that's probably unlikely now, I would imagine.
Impossible now. It'd be the dark side of the moon now that anything like this would happen. So this is real-time stroboscopic exposure at the University of Texas at Austin. These two were bound for the Olympics. It was a story about new metal sports. And Sports Illustrated wanted me to do something very complex. I mean, again, not to underestimate all the work that goes in prior to the clicking of the shutter. It's almost as if the shutter click is the easiest part of the job. Just try getting 9 trampolines, Olympic-sized trampolines, in one space at one time. That's hard to do. So I had suggested to the magazine, and of course these are self-inflicted wounds, David. Some of this stuff, these are my ideas. I said we get most of, if not the entire United States trampolining team in the air at once. So this was shot at an airport hangar. Between these two pictures, that and this, each of them took a week on location to prepare. Movie lights, cranes, hundreds of yards of black fabric, etc., trying to achieve this in camera. That's the thing. There's a couple of pictures coming up, and that I'll show the path to. That nowadays it would be, the way it would be done would be digital, obviously. It would probably be done in a studio, and it would probably be done for, a fraction of the cost. And this sealed my fate at the National Geographic. I lit that whole building, Ellis Island. Biggest lighting job I ever did, about over 200,000 watt seconds. Because I had to light the entire interior because it was a construction shell at the time. There was no power in it. And so I had to bring in all the power. I had to bring in my generator truck onto the Ellis Island. And here's the thing, that you do as a photographer, you have an intuitive sense of what you need to do. The first person I had to go see on the construction site was the foreman. And it was a controlled work site. And I said, this is what I need to do. National Geographic photographer, I got to bring my own generator truck on the island. Goes,
as you do.
I think that's possible. And I gave him $1,000. And he put it in his pocket. And he said, you can drive your truck on the island. It's okay. But I worked in New York.
Very New York. Yeah.
20 years. And I said, this is the way I'm going to grease these wheels.
Yeah.
I'll show you this real quick. I just had this redone. That's been the wonderful thing about being home and taking a look at a few things. Vanessa Williams, and I've lived a lot of lifetimes. You indicated, David, you shot film, you saw the transition. I actually went through the digital backlash, I guess I would call it, with magazines where they actually resented digital. Life magazine came to me and said, we want you to do an incredibly complex picture on film without the aid of the computer, because we want to show people that we do real photography, not this digital stuff. Little did we know, right?
Quite.
So the idea, the editor's notion, she was very, very smart editor. She came to me and said, I'd like you to shoot Vanessa Williams in all of her changes and Kiss of the Spider Woman on Broadway, where she was starring at that time. And she went through a lot. Here's the other piece of film. So I did this in one day. These two individual frames that I'm showing you here are each 8x10 original film, shot on a Sinar 8x10. And what I did was I drew a millimetric gate over. I'll see if I can move my cursor. So each of these is its own exposure right in here. I got my color picker listed here, but I would draw the gate over, expose this, then draw it, and so each of these things was a sliver of what was being exposed. And if you made a mistake, the whole piece was ruined. And
I think just to really reiterate, this is the same person, just multiple exposures on an 8x10 camera. And having used an 8x10 camera myself, I can't imagine just how frustrating and lengthy that process must have been.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what the magazine did, was they butted it together in the middle and ran a 4-page gatefold out of it. Dropped it in the magazine without the aid of the computer. And there's tons of flaws in it, tons of flaws. The hat here should be a little bit over there. But the simple fact is, this was an exercise in pain, to be sure, and also just camera prowess. I mean, they relied on me to make this happen and make it just off the charts significant in terms of its degree of difficulty. Okay.
Yeah, pretty staggering. So I just sent a chat message as Ian was asking. So a single piece of 8x10 film, well, actually two. So you had two shots, didn't you, and then pieced together. But I just imagine her getting to outfit number 5 and then you saying, actually, we made a mistake. Can you go back to the start again?
Well, tip of the hat to Vanessa Williams. She was an absolute pro to work with. She did this with me all day long at Silver Cup Studios in New York, and that night she was on Broadway.
Yeah, crazy.
Amazing lady.
Yeah.
Amazing lady.
Just while we've just had a little pause, I'm just going to interrupt you with a question. This one's quite timely, I think, from Ihor, I think, who's out in Canada. Digital cameras now allow one to be less accurate in determining focus, exposure, and so on. Are you finding now that photographers rely more on the in-camera ability rather than the value of knowing exposure, speed, ISO, focus, instinct, and so on?
Oh, absolutely. I rely on the digital cameras myself.
Yeah.
Trust me, autofocus came along at just the right time in terms of the curve of the efficiency of my eyes.
Right.
That's probably true for a lot of us, in that the amazing abilities of the cameras. I mean, I almost feel like I have to go to confession or something. I rarely, if ever, use a handheld light meter anymore. And I always had a handheld light meter with me, spot meter and handheld incident meter. Now, the meters in the cameras are so good. The color sensitivities, auto white balance, excellent. The focus, really, really strong. The resolution, I mean, it has to match, right? The efficiency of the autofocus has to keep lockstep with the increase in resolution, because, honestly, David, at the newspapers I grew up at, you could make a picture that was 5 feet back focus, but the dot screens at the newspapers were so rough, it didn't really matter.
You get away with it. Yeah.
You get away with it. Now, like I'm shooting a lot of Z7 at 45.7 megapixels. You've got nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. You have to be sharp. So, yes, the digital excellence of the tools that we have available to us are significant. I mean, I've done stuff like this with crews, and expense and all of that. I find myself now that I can do a tremendous amount as a 1 or 2 or 3-man band, and the digital paves the way for that unquestionably.
Absolutely.
So am I going along here okay without quite yet getting into any retouching? Are we doing okay here?
Yeah, we're doing great, definitely.
Okay. All right. I'll keep plowing along here just a little bit, but I'll move quickly. We're getting into some digital stuff now, and Capture One is mentioned. You guys use this as the lead photograph for this particular series, Impossible Pictures.
Yep.
So there's a very rough sketch. Hard to kind of completely understand what's going on here, but you see this big highlight up in here. That is all these up here. This up here, these are 2400 watt second packs, 10 of them, 24,000 watt seconds of light. And I'm in the pool, and I'm triggering my flash, which is triggering the flash of a safety diver, okay? Right. And then there's underwater HMIs lifting the level of light. And so there's an assistant on the deck with a photo eye pushed into the water in a plexiglass canister that is triggering a ProPhoto 7B, which is pointed at all these units, and therefore it's triggering. And when I flash here, this flashes here, these flash, everything happens simultaneously. And NASA was shooting in the pool at like ASA 1600 color neg and getting very murky results. This is ISO 100 Ektachrome.
Okay.
But the backstory of this really is that I spent a ton of effort and time. I had been designated by National Geographic and NASA as the STS-95 photographer of record. It was John Glenn's return to space. I knew the magazine was not going to run this picture. That's, an admission on my part. I knew they weren't going to run this, but I needed to shoot this picture. That's the thing as photographers. We get desperate, we get passionate. There's things we just know that we need to do, and I knew I needed to make this photograph, even though there wasn't a prayer the magazine was going to run it, because that's not John Glenn. John Glenn didn't do an EVA. Right. But I leveraged my position and my influence at NASA at that moment to allow them to let me dive in that pool. And it was not an easy thing to do. I had to get certified as a commercial diver. I had to take a course and pass a 100-question test as a commercial diver. I had to take a swim test, pretty lengthy swim test. I had to do a dive test where I went to the bottom of this pool at 40 feet, take off all my scuba gear and put it all back on. Jeez. I had to swim underwater 60 feet. Okay, to my instructor, who was an ex-Marine, who was determined not to make it 59 feet. He was determined that I swim all the way. Yeah. And all of that stuff went in. I worked for about 2 months, physically and mentally, to prepare myself to do this. When I showed up for the dive, the doc who had to do all the last-minute checks, he looked at me and says, "Are you feeling okay?" And I said, "Yep." He goes, "You tell me you're feeling okay if you were bleeding from the ears." And I said, "Yep." "I'm making this dive, doc, and I am doing the shot, But a plan is a necessary thing when you go into complex, quote-unquote, impossible pictures. This is all done with speed lights, what's about to come up. So you can see what I've got going here in terms of, let's just see here. If I go back in my library now, okay, I'll keep going with this grid. What you can see is coming here is the grid to, where are we here? We're grid to raw, to pre-light to light. So this, Nikon asked me to do this with SB5000s, the new dawn of radio TTL. So I don't know. I like crazy guys in garages. Oxyacetylene torches are really cool to play with. And so I created this scene in a garage in San Francisco, and that's what it looks like as a raw frame. Toolboxes, all sorts of, they luckily had this old charismatic truck, which was great. This is kind of what it looks like, kind of in rough form without any lighting. There's an SB5000 in that lamp over there, which is an essential thing, because you're shooting so wide, you want to be able to hide lights in the photograph. Lights are actually physically in the photograph. There's lights in the engine compartment. There's lights on the grill. There's lights on the back wall. There's a smoke machine with light coming through it. The red glow on the left-hand side of the frame is from an SB5000 with a red gel. Things are warm. The lamp is warm because that's got a CTO gel on it, because that would be the ordinary color of that light. So when you go into these things, you have to approach with confidence, and you have to have a plan. So pre-visualization is hugely important in the realm of doing these complicated photographs.
And do you always make a plan like this? A couple of people asked a similar question, or is it just for the larger shoots, or is there always some kind of pre-light sketch like this?
There is a pre-light usually for almost everything I do. Sometimes it's just in my head, and I don't really write it down. I just know intuitively what I'm going to do. And especially on simpler shoots, something like this, what's coming up here, is extensively planned out. Not only is the lighting planned, from a scouting picture, but our talent is where all those balloons are, okay? Because there's 19 extras, if you will, in this photograph. Again, detail of the Nikon D850, they wanted me to emphasize that. And the other thing about the confidence that's linked directly is to maintain a certain calm in your head, because you are the eye of the storm. Everything is spinning off of you. Also, David, always remember to put your speed lights in the toilet paper. That's it. Anybody's got to take away from it,
yeah.
And police assistance is necessary when you're shooting out on the streets. And then that's the final.
What was this shoot for?
This was done for Nikon. They wanted a street scene that they wanted me to use as many SB5000s as I could, and to show the radio prowess of the unit, and also the efficiency and resolution of the D850. So here's a mistake. Mr. Genius didn't read the manual for the SB5000, because I intuitively kind of knew how to work it. Come on. All right. Admit it, gang. We're a bunch of photographers. Have we always read the manual?
Nope.
No. But you should read the manual before you show up on a big shoot, right? And what I found on location, I thought, well, radio, I can fire as many of these as I want. Well, the bandwidth allows you to fire 18 radio-controlled units, not more than that. So I was like, oops. So I had to work out a situation where the 18 radio-controlled units are firing, and everything is manual, okay, at that point, which I would have been anyway, because all the units are pretty well maxed out. And then I used photo eyes, the internal photo eye, the triggers on the other units, to place them in proximity to the radio-controlled units, so they would fire off of the radio-controlled units. And I think we ended up with 31 units being played out here.
Jeez.
But Mr. Smart Guy here thought it was going to be a much easier piece of cake to eat than it actually was. And I could have avoided that if I had actually read the manual. So,
And this is that's a single shot, right? I just saw a question come up from Pete. So that's one take, yeah.
One frame, yeah.
Yeah, one frame, yeah.
Frame, yeah. Same thing here. This is the Paramount Theater in Oakland, beautiful old theater, and we invited a barbershop quartet. And again, Nikon wanted me, this was part and parcel of these other assignments, they wanted me to use both the new radio flashes and the old flashes in conjunction. So they could come up with a picture that would show that you could seamlessly blend your older gear with your newer gear. makes sense from a marketing perspective.
Yep.
So that's the theater right there. There's our gentleman. And 19 small flashes later, that is the result. The gentlemen were really lovely guys. They didn't sing all that well, actually, to be honest, but they were really good guys. So much fun, elegant gentlemen, fun to be around. And of course, the planning, essential, because what obviously I have to do is put all the radio stuff way back in here, because that's not going to fire line of sight. My line of sight stuff is all on stage with me, so I pushed it out there. So
yeah, and as it's using the light trigger, isn't it? It's got to be line of sight, hasn't it, or at least close to line of sight. Yeah,
has to pick up and has to be seeing that actual flash impulse.
Yeah.
One thing I would also counsel during this hour that we have is don't be afraid of your imagination. Let it rip. Understand that you will fail occasionally. Mm-hmm. I had this nutty idea of putting elderly aliens in a diner, and you can see how sophisticated I get here. That light shaper right there is a diner napkin.
Oh, the one just behind the gentleman at the front. Yep.
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 And that became this. I wanted to have. You can see the book back there. These guys are reacting.
Aliens real.
So we had a prop book, concocted, and my idea was to have an alien at the diner, an older alien couple, like from Queens, the kind of folks you would meet on the subway, except they're from outer space, and that's I don't know. It's the way I think. I think maybe strangely, but the great thing about Nick, who's I've worked with any number of times, he became our resident alien. We ended up, Nikon saw this picture, and then Adorama ran this. They saw it and said, well, can you do an alien for us, like in a diner? And I said, sure, why not? So I called up Nick, and we made him a different kind of alien, not so elderly this time.
Right. Traditional alien, yeah.
A more traditional alien. So I don't want to go too much further without getting to a little retouching. So maybe I'll just jump here just a little bit, David. What do you think?
Yeah, let's edit a shot just because that gives us an insight into the. I think we've seen with the extensive planning execution that the result from camera is pretty close to the final. Your final vision. So then capture one is your icing on the cake, I guess.
Yeah, in many, many ways. So I haven't done this one yet, but let's start with a mistake. So this is the world's largest binocular telescope. National Geographic sent me out to shoot it, and they couldn't open the scope, and so I did this inside. And it was massive. I mean, this is a huge, huge installation. And it took a long time to light this. And it's a lifeless piece of crap. I knew it when I was shooting it. The old, thing about putting a key light on the guy and giving him a flashlight and say, well, make believe that you're inspecting something. And I was just so disappointed in myself at the end of this that I went back and I literally begged my editor. I said, look, I have to go back. I know where the picture is, but it's not inside. We have to wait, push deadline a little bit, wait for better weather. So he luckily said yes. He's a very good friend of mine. And there's a moonshot for you. I found that in the old files. That's from when I went back. What I did was I made arrangements to shoot from the outside. This is the top of Mount Graham, 11,500 feet. This is the world's largest binocular telescope. So I made arrangements for a 175-foot boom truck to come up. I think it's 220 switchbacks up Mount Graham, massive truck, to put me up in a place where I could actually shoot from the outside. So I'm on a 175-foot toothpick on top of this mountain, and all the flashes are inside. And this is what we came up with.
That's better.
Yeah, for sure. for sure.
And how's the triggering on that? Was that just the radio slaves again?
That's the radio. What we have in here are what's going on in here is there's my light stands with the radio receivers cranked up, and there you can see my assistant, another assistant over here. They're racing around. I'm on radio from here, instructing them, because here's one thing I'll show you. We spent a lot of money on this for geographic. So let me just go back to my grid here for a second. And this is what we ended up with. Some folks might be curious about, like, well, one of these big shoots, like, do you shoot a lot? You know, and this is it. This is the whole thing. And there's very few usable photographs here, okay, because I've got a window that's closing on me rapidly. And I'm shooting, you know, there's the western sky, okay, which means that, for instance, here, the eastern sky is behind me. The whole key are these huge mirrors here, and when they go black, you don't have a picture anymore. So you can see what's happening here is I am rapidly out of the game, and we ended up in this sweet spot right in here where everything thankfully worked. Again, you know, 20, 30,000 watt seconds of flash inside, all big flash, all being driven by radio. And what we ended up with was a final that looked a bit, well, not a bit, it looked like this, you know. So
yeah, it's very, very different to the shot where you've lost the light behind you and you can't see the mirrors anymore.
So when you spend this kind of dough, you have to accept the fact that, you know, when you go back into your, let's see, where am I here? Cool. All right. When you go back, you know, to your editor, they have to be very, not forgiving, but they have to be understanding of the process, that this is a slice, this is a almost desperate attempt to come up with something that nobody else is going to get. And there's a very limited window of success, you know, for something like this.
Definitely.
So this is a NEF. You can see it's spotty. I should have cleaned my sensors better. And you know, again, my tools here are going to be pretty basic for the person out there who's extremely well versed in all of this. But in fact, I'm probably doing a little bit more here than already, in a sense, outside of the sharpening and stuff like that National Geographic did. Because I'll show you the spread that it ran, and it's really pretty close to what I shot.
Yep.
So you tell me here, David, and, you know, in terms of, you know, if I'm, you know, going off the deep end here, because I've been having a great deal of fun playing with the program, and I've gotten myself into trouble on a couple of occasions. You know,
well, fortunately, nothing is permanent.
Well, that's it. See, that's another reason that Capture One is perfect for me. It's non-destructive.
Yeah.
I would find myself in other editing programs just basically quitting the whole program. And thankfully, I still had my raw file someplace in my file, and literally starting all over again because I didn't know how to back it up, you know, and I had just gone and done something terribly wrong and didn't know how to recover from it. So the beautiful thing about Capture One is that what I'm doing here now, I can recover from. I can sort of play with this endlessly. Not that I have, you know, a mandate to do that. Here's the thing we all find as photographers, right? Sometimes we're a complete package, a designer, a retoucher, a shooter, etc. My bailiwick for all these years, people pay me to put my eye into the lens. So this, to me, becomes this wonderful additional capability that we're developing here at the studio. And I'll show you a couple of things, you know, hopefully in time here, that where I was desperately waiting for someone to help me, I can now do this on my own. And it's really quite wonderful. I know I'm probably going off here on people are maybe rolling their eyes saying, dude, it's just post-production. Don't get too excited about it. We all do it, but I crushed the blacks here a little bit. For this kind of thing, this is a D3 camera. So it's got good resolution, good out of the gate quality, to be sure. For geographic, I would not, really alter the color. I don't see a need to alter the color. I'd pitch this over to you at any time, David. Let me know what you think might or could happen here. Obviously, my spotting is needed here, and what I'm finding really is I really love the arrows. I know I can shut the arrows down, but I actually love the arrows. Right now I have my flow all the way up because this is like, very simple stuff to do up in here. It's not that I could not have done this prior to this, but the fact that I can see where the machine itself is drawing from
exactly
is actually is really, really valuable to me. So again, and I can move that around. That may or may not be a spot. These might be a little bit of like dings on the outside of the building.
Bit of abuse. Yeah.
Sure, and again, because you see all these kind of hash marks and stuff like that. If I wanted to alter, maybe even cool down, though I probably wouldn't want to do that so much if I went into the color realm and just got kind of wherever I might be, I'd have to get out of my my healing and go back here into my background layer to get that active. But where I would go would be like to just experiment a little bit in here in the interior. You can see where I'm a little burnt up, in here. So I might just try that, have the just take that tonality because it's shared on either side of the building in kind of an equal measure. That's one thing I did right. Well, the values on the flip side of this somehow ended up being done properly, which is
I'm sure that wasn't an accident.
And if I wanted to hype it a little bit, I could richen it just a tiny bit. And there might be folks out there who might say, well, the sky is like maybe too much of the tonality of the front of this thing. This thing, it's hard to judge the size of it. It's basically a 20-story building. It's really, really big. So if I wanted to maybe even change the hue of the sky, up in there, I don't know exactly if that's advisable, but I could saturate the sky a little bit, make it a little more poppy. But if I go back into my grid, you'll see here, find myself again here, that's the shot in the geographic. So they really didn't accelerate it at all.
They didn't deviate much from the outer camera shot, no.
So that's the realm that I kind of come from as well, whereas shooting commercially now, all bets are off. You can do literally anything you want, but the tonality that comes back from the field to a magazine historically has been respected, and they kind of sort of would leave it alone.
Ian was asking, was your gantry moving around in the wind as well?
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yes. Is Ian the only person on the line? Yes, indeed. If I go back here just really quick to show this, that folder, the exterior of Mount Graham, if you can see here, Ian, and in the earlier, let me get back to full screen because the F key is right next to the G key. Okay, you can see back here, it's closed off, right? But I asked them probably foolishly, to open the rear doors.
Right.
So because I was losing the back of the building. So when those doors got open, which are massive, a wind funnel came right through this building and hit my crane.
Directed
and
at
the
you.
bucket that I was in went up and backwards by easily 5 to 10 feet. Just yo-yoed.
Yeah.
And the guys on the ground are freaking out because I think the crane, they said, look, we're going to give you like a 25 mile an hour wind tolerance. And they were on radio to me like, we got to take you down. We're going to take you down. And I'm like, you don't take me down. You don't touch that crane. You know, and that's the nature of the beast, you know. But how are we doing on time?
We're good. We've got, oh, geez. I looked 5 minutes ago and I thought we had 20 minutes left and now we've got 4 minutes, but I'm sure we can overrun a little bit as well. I'm just adding in a comment from JD, said that the best part of the telescope picture is that the only person to duplicate it would have to spend the same amount of effort, or of course do it by drone as well, which is, you know, a new medium which no one's had access to until recent years as well.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, that'd have to be quite a drone because you'd also have to have the ability to trigger a massive strobe system inside.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, so that would have to be an intriguing drone array, I think.
Yeah, and not bring it down as well. And of course, dealing with the wind situation as well, then all kinds of different aspects too. But totally different way of shooting something these days. Question from Johnny. Does Joe plan his complex shot from a simple photo, take it home and make a sketch? Or do you make the complex sketch from being in person at the site itself?
Good question. We scout when we can, but intriguingly, here's just a quick thing. You have to be sensitive to the nuances of location. Mm-hmm. This room, my studio manager Lynn had scouted this bedroom because we needed to do a shot, and I had this Halloween idea. You see the light? That's natural light. You see how the light? I was in the room and I was scouting. The painter who was going to come in has their rags on the floor, and I looked at the light and something stuck with me. I made a quick picture of it. Light from the sun doesn't go up; it comes down. Mm-hmm. See, it's going up on the wall.
Yep.
So I went to the window and I looked, and it's a wealthy home in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I realized that the sun is coming up because it's bouncing off the pool.
Ah, a giant reflector. Yeah.
And that gave me the key to the whole picture, believe it or not, because what I ended up doing was recreating that. You can see here, I've blocked the window off from the natural sunlight. Mm-hmm. And then I've recreated the pool, if you will, with a 6x6 Lastilite silver screen and 3 2400 watt seconds lights into it. And it's all based on that scouting picture that we ended up here with all these lights in a bedroom to create a Halloween fantasy.
Cool.
That in the mural in the background, the evil elf is actually coming out of her wall, and the little girl realizes that she's reading a scary story, and the scary story is about to come alive. And the glow of the window through the sheer is the fact that I'm using an incandescent white balance. Mm-hmm. I'm bouncing a tremendous amount of light off the silver screen up, and you can see that the light is going up.
Yep.
And it was all based on just a happenstance, quick look at that. And the whole shot flowed from that particular instance.
I assume she's got a speed light in her lap as well, I imagine.
Yes, she's got a light in the book, and there's a light hidden behind the dolls here that's keying her face.
Right.
There's a speed light in here. There's a speed light coned off here. There's warm light simulating the sunrise on the wall here. And then the cool thing about I use Pro Photo. One of these guys, this big globe, simulates a room light. When you flick the room light on,
they're really cool. Yeah, yeah.
You know, so that just fills the room with like a bare bulb effect, soft bare bulb, and then you can dim it as you see fit. And then you can see all the there's key lights and grids and snoots and this and that and the other thing. It's all an exercise in extremely controlled, planned out light. And that's that, so it's a good question to prompt that, little discussion.
Yeah, and it doesn't look overlit. I think that's the key as well. Just because there's many light sources, it doesn't look like it's too much.
They're very controlled in the sense that, like, if you put up an umbrella in a room like that, you're dead in the water. You're just dead in the water. Forget it. You're going to blow away any charisma. The other thing I could offer just really quickly, David, is when you're looking to do this kind of stuff, and you need to make a proposal, the ability to write really good, simple but powerful proposals. It's very hard to separate a client from their money nowadays.
Absolutely.
And convince them to give you some dough to go out and shoot some pictures. This I wrote in about 10 minutes, basically based on the fact that I've seen too many James Bond movies. And it's all about a lady escaping with gems from a museum, and the ad agency loved it. And they said, yes, we want you to do this. And the next thing you know, I'm in the Museum of Ethnography in Budapest, and I'm gridding out the entire museum to light. So this is one of those things where you have to be extremely confident, because everything is spinning off of you. There's a crew of between 30 and 40 people on the set. It took a week of planning and pre-production, casting, wardrobe, etc., and lighting. There's a crane with 6 2400 watt second units outside, lighting the whole roof of the museum, because we had to shoot at night. We couldn't close the museum. So we couldn't walk in until 8 o'clock at night, and we worked until 6 a.m. the next morning. So there's no ambient light on the streets. So the crane is pumping a tremendous amount of light into the giant kind of alcoves of this beautiful museum. And then, of course, the funny / story of it is she's a cat burglar, and she's about to make her escape, but her long evening gown catches on a statue and knocks it over. Sleeping security guard. This is about 30 strobes at the end of the day. Lots of different lights, some right down to speed lights. Like here, this guy is lit with a speed light. He's lit with 2 speed lights. The balance of the picture, like the highlight on him, is matched by a highlight here, which is being thrown from a Profoto battery unit that's over here. This gentleman is lit by a speed light. This is lit by a speed light. And then, of course, what's happening here is you can see the gentleman here with fishing poles.
Yep.
Or, well, they're booms, really, but they have fishing line on the booms, and they're the ones creating the drama in the dress.
Right.
They flip the dress in the air, and then we retouch out the filament lines.
That's a good timely question from Jim, actually. So you're mixing Profoto and Speedlight here, and Jim asked the reason for the Profoto edition. Is that simply a need for more power, more watt seconds?
Absolutely. Big space like that, it goes well beyond the realm of speedlights to control. Absolutely. You need a big pop of light.
Definitely.
That's, you judge the scale of things, and then you back your solution out of that.
Definitely. So I'm just looking at our time. So how are we doing through your grid of shots?
Well, there's still a few more to play around with if you want, but I could go to something very recent and end up with some retouching if you like.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So, good old Adorama asked me to come back and start teaching for them and I said, sure, but here's the thing. I don't want to just go to a studio and say, put the light over here. If you allow me to kind of exercise some creative control, I will be happy to do something. And so, me being, again, a product of too many movies and crime mysteries and bad novels and all of that, and also being a dance photographer for my whole career, I came up with this idea that prima ballerinas are being offed in New York City in the most dastardly of ways. That the competition is so keen that some ballerina someplace is actually murdering her competition as a noir mystery. So we called it the Point Shoe Mysteries. And I'm creating crime scenes around New York. Yes, I'm a sick son of a gun. What can I say? My imagination doesn't stop. So this is in Brooklyn, and we found our first dead ballerina in a laundromat in a dryer. And this is probably 10, 12 lights. It's in Bushwick in Brooklyn, so my lights outside are simulating the lights from a police cruiser and flaring across the ceiling, red and blue. My lights are bolted to my studio truck because we didn't have a permit to put lights on the sidewalk. And as I say,
is that the handy workaround actually, to bolt it to a truck?
Oh, it's a very handy thing to do. Absolutely. Right. Because I kept the battery units inside the truck, ran the power cables outside, bolted my lights to the luggage rack. Because trust me, in certain neighborhoods in New York, if you put your light stands out on the sidewalk and don't pay attention to them, you'll very soon find yourself shooting available light. Yeah. because your lights will be gone. Yeah. So then we took a hiatus, right, because of COVID. But I was able, the first time, just last week on Thursday night, I went out again for Adorama TV, and I went out into the streets of New York, and we did a production shot. And let me just find it here. I have this on my desktop.
Second dead ballerina.
Yes. So this is months later, and of course we had to observe COVID regulations. And it was the first time, David, I've been out in the street with a camera in my hands since early March. First assignment, first time back. And so, again, the essence of this is just to have some fun with it and to, let me just see where I am here. Okay, so we could try this as this is the raw file coming out of camera. So a little bit deep on the deeper saturated side of things. If you did the histogram, my histograms tend to tilt to the left anyway. I tend to work oftentimes in a fairly saturated color palette. So I'm home, and I came home with this and I started playing with them in Capture One, and I found that my sense of color adapted really well to the potential of the tools as I know them. And again, my skill is growing over time, slowly, but there's a path to getting to know all this stuff, just like lighting, just like photography. This is not an instantly acquired skill. No. So here we go. So if I put myself up into just make the whole thing a little bit brighter, because in camera it looked fine, but on the screen here, as I noted, a lot of my stuff was just a little bit on the dark side, maybe half a stop or so for, gone are the days, actually, David, just a quick historical aside, when you were shooting transparency film, and this was another fine tuning you had to go through, National Geographic wanted their stuff like a stop thick, saturated, because they had a gravure process that was really beautiful and they could really do things with it. Sports Illustrated would like their chromes like a half stop hot, because Sports Illustrated would run like, I don't know, a few 100,000 copies in a week. They would print it on paper that was the quality of toilet paper. And so they would look at you if you came in with a super saturated chrome and say, what are you thinking?
This isn't going to work. Yeah.
So you had, you dialed in for your client, a bit. So my go-to tools are really very straightforward. The brightness, tends to affect the midtones, his suit and things like that. I'll come up there. And saturation, does this really need any saturation? I don't know, David, you tell me. I'll put a little bit in there. A little bit of clarity, not a bad thing to have with this much stuff for the program to chew on. Mm-hmm. I love the vignette tool, it's right there. I put it up in my table of contents here because it's a frequently used tool, and the great thing about it, it's part of the program. I'm like, you don't have to use a plugin or anything like that. It's right there for you. Um, Highlights, I've found that, until, as David sort of told me quite a while ago, push it until it doesn't look good, and that again is the real-time aspect that I go by here. So I just kind of take my highlights down, and I'm very aware that some of the stuff in here is bright. Like there's another flash down here in the subway, and that's really blowing away, but I want it to be that glow at that point. There's not a heck of a lot I can do to control it because there's a lot of other lights down there in the subway. So I match their intensity with a gridded B10 plus that's kind of rimming her out. She's the evil ballerina, the perpetrator, right? and actually, this, just FYI, this is once again the dead ballerina in the laundromat. So I said on camera the other day when I was doing it, I said, people are going to come after me because they're going to look at me and say, Joe, you already killed that ballerina, But I just always subscribe to Miracle Max in The Princess Bride. There's dead and there's mostly dead. So it's the movies. Anything can happen. And I open up the shadows just a bit, not too much, and take blacks down a little bit. The thing about this, beyond my basic tools that I oftentimes get involved in, this is starting to get pushing my buttons a little bit in terms of what I can accomplish. So if I'm going to go, there's a couple of things like I had no control over. I'm talking really fast here, David. This, for instance, I had no control over. That's a clock. It just blows away. Mm-hmm. If I had a bigger crew and flags, I just would have flagged it off with a black cutter, and it would have been done in camera. But now I will do it, via make this a little bit bigger, and I'm going to leave my flow all the way up because I really just want this to kind of go away. And if I take a look at that, see, the Capture One is making the decision based on certain tonalities over here. So the nice thing is I can grab it and push it up in there and pin it so that it'll draw from that black space. And I just kind of literally almost color that in. Let it just kind of, disappear in the background. I might have even, done one stroke too many, maybe just a tiny bit of detail back in there might actually not be the worst thing in the world. I could also get rid of that if I chose to, and that's, and then that works. That's gone. The nice thing about, for me, especially in my learning curve here, with knowing where letting the arrows go where that spot is, I just goofed, okay, because I still have it pinned to the black, so I have to release it. I have to free the cursor. So the machine is making the decision over here, but I want this up in here someplace to kind of match that greenish brick facade up in there, and I'll see what I can do about letting that kind of match up a little bit with that and kind of disappear that a little bit. Now, it made a good decision here, pulling from this slightly green tonality. Mm-hmm. So now this really just kind of looks like the wall, for me anyway. I'm not going to get over fussy about, there are some folks I know, God, I admire them so much. They will just work something down right to the very pixel. Never been my strong suit. And probably never will. So other things that I'd probably do to this. There's certain florid nature to this. She's got a key light on her. Poor Erica. I owe her so much. I mean,
how long was she in the bin for?
She's been in a garbage can. Just to defend myself a little bit, it's a brand new garbage can. I bought it off of Amazon.
Right.
It was completely pristine and clean. It was not your average New York City garbage can.
Yeah, I was thinking she definitely took one for the team if she was in an actual New York street garbage can. Yeah.
No, I would not. I would not have done that to her. I would not have done that to her. So there's so many areas here to kind of chew on, really, in lots of ways. I mean, if I went to a layer where I wanted to just take some exposure down, for instance, I'll go out of my healing brush here, and I'll take some exposure down, for instance, right? And then I'll clear that mask, and then I'll just paint this guy in. just because it's up at the top of the frame. I've always been kind of a bear about having like super bright stuff going out of the frame, because to me it creates an area of powerful graphic interest. Our eyes are always drawn to that which is bright. And if I put something at the edge of the frame, it's going to be a distraction to somebody who's going to leave the frame, and have their attention drawn up and away from where I want it to be down in here. Moving pretty fast here, David. Are we doing okay?
Yep, we're doing good. And then I've just been putting out a couple of conclusion questions that fit nicely as well.
Okay, cool. Now, if I wanted to do a mask, an empty adjustment layer, and then kind of, paint in a little bit in here. Let's see. Wait a second. What I would try to do in here is maybe differentiate just a little bit. So if I went down, say, I make that adjustment layer, and let me go over to maybe my color, and see if I could just take maybe the edge. I like the saturation of the scene, but I'd like to maybe desaturate her a little bit.
Be a bit more dead. Yeah.
Yeah, make her. Yeah, she is deceased, so maybe I can just kind of paint her a little bit in this kind of a fashion, and then take what I just painted, and maybe take that down in here, saturation wise. Too much, maybe.
No, she definitely looks more dead now.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I spent about, I can't do it because I'm moving really fast. I'm a little bit scattered here now because I spent about a half an hour on this, another frame the other night, and I found that what I tried to do and was relatively successful at was to make her a little desaturated, and then try to bring back some of the color of these ballet shoes. So let me just quickly get back into my background here and see if I can. That's a little bit bright. So if I take the lightness of that down just a touch, maybe that could be helpful. And then David's probably nervous right now because I'm making all these layers like Joe.
No, the layers are there to be made for sure.
And then if I just, again, went back into my main panels over here and just took the brightness down a little bit across the board, the shoe is looking pretty good there. And then I clear that mask, and then get back into a brush, and then kind of paint those slippers back in. Now that may be a little gray and a little much, perhaps. But then what I could do is just go to my opacity and kind of like play with that a tiny bit to see where the wrinkles and the points you have kind of there's full, so maybe somewhere's in there. Probably still needs to be played with to a point, If I made, if I went in and did another filled adjustment layer and went the other direction in exposure, overall exposure, and maybe not exposure, maybe brightness, because her skin tones what I'm trying to do here is take a look at the perpetrator ballerina back in here and bring her to the fore a little bit. So maybe I can just kind of paint her in a little bit. I'm not being particularly careful here. I would be more so, to create a final image, but so therefore brighten her. I mean, Nick is a great guy. Nick is a character actor in New York. He's been in the John Wick movies, and we've become really good friends over the years. And right now, he's not being a very good detective because he's looking down the block and the perpetrator is disappearing into the subway. Yeah. But again, it's the movies. It's dramatic tension, David. That's what I'm going for here.
And you never suspect the ballerina either.
No, you never suspect a ballerina. Why? How could you expect this? This ballerina.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, certain basic things I can play with so easily, which is wonderful. If I went into my color picker here and just said, well, I don't necessarily want to do this, perhaps, but if I just did like a bluish tonality and I wanted to make that a little bit less kind of prominent in the photograph, I could do that. Those kinds of things, because that blue tonality up in there is really the only blue, that I've got going.
Easy to isolate.
And I can take the lightness down. I can make it a tiny bit more. I can do with a shot like this. This is like a playground for color, and that's the way I meant it to be. There's probably, I think, about 12, 13 flashes in this, and that's what this is meant to be about. Is like, again, I had the grid for this in my head because when I go into New York City, I eat at the Hollywood Diner, and I've always thought, like, this would be kind of cool. I could probably do something here. I never thought I'd do like a dead ballerina and put a trash can on the street and then do that. But
there you go.
The life of a photographer is unpredictable. The Irish poet Seamus Heaney always said, and I think it's a mantra for photographers, walk on air against your better judgment.
Yeah, definitely. Darren was asking, do you have a schematic for this shot?
Not yet. I'm probably going to do an after the fact schematic for this. And I will get to that, but it's a brand new picture. This is less than a week old.
And we're going to see a video about this on Adorama's channel, correct?
Correct. And the great thing about this was that I used the Tether Tools Air Direct, Air Direct into my computer. So I was able to work wirelessly in the street, and the Air Direct works seamlessly with Capture One. Mm-hmm. So everything I'm shooting in the street is piping directly into my computer. It was so seamless, and I hadn't been behind the camera in so long, David. I actually forgot at a couple of moments, and this, of course, is embarrassingly on the BTS. I'm looking at my LCD thinking the scene is going to change, because my picture will come up.
Yeah.
But with the Air Direct, it goes to the computer.
Yeah.
So I'm still looking at a live view on my LCD, and the picture's coming up and the guys on the crew are like, Joe, oh yes, that's right, it is.
But of course, yeah.
But the wireless aspects of transmission there worked perfectly, and that, again, hats off to Capture One, because we have used it for a long time now as the prime go-to tethering device for us in the field on a big job to pipe into, the digital tech cart or whatever it is. Right. Now we have wireless capacity to do that, and now, of course, the world of post-production. So it's become kind of, from the moment of capture, we live in the realm of Capture One.
Absolutely. Well, everything's been fantastic so far, and of course we both predicted that we were going to overrun, or at least I thought we probably would.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. No one's complaining, and everyone's still here, so that's all good. So I've been writing some notes as we've been chatting, and I think I've got it down to my final 3 questions. So the first one is from R. Derek Thomas. And he asked this an hour ago, so he's been very patient. Hopefully you're still here, Mr. Thomas. So given the transition from film to digital and also AI imagery to some extent, in terms of creating impossible shots, how do you think that's going to go? Because how do you develop an artistry if anything can be created digitally or artificially or whatever, and less reliant on, I guess, in the single frame capture as well?
That's a very prescient and forward or future looking question. And
definitely.
I don't have a crystal ball. I'm a location photographer, and that's where I thrive, is in the experience of the moment and the moment of exposure. I'm shooting, not shooting, actually, I've been directing some video over the last couple of years, and I find that to be a different experience, but still real-time, based on what you see, what you hear, what you feel, your emotions, your ability to tell stories. That is not to take away anything from AI geniuses and the world of Hollywood who are living on, green screens and creating these fantastical things that we all enjoy. But to me, it's a separate art form. It's intertwined with storytelling, it's visual storytelling, but maybe not a separate art form. Maybe it's a separate skill set, might be the best way of putting it. And I will continue to pursue life as I see it with a camera.
Yeah, excellent. Second to last question from Michael, who also has been waiting very patiently as well. How much do you think mattered your photography skills in comparison to everything else? For example, like talking to people, being in an energizing mood, and he says he absolutely love your pictures. Bunging bribes, we can add into that one as well, I guess. So, but yeah, how much photography, how much other skills?
Good question. Let me get back into my main page here just for a sec, just in case something pops into my head that might be an example of a question that is being asked. It varies. Some sets, if you will, some objectives are driven forward by the camera work. You have a scenario situation, there's maybe an art director at play, there's a need, there's a client, there's a layout, there's a design that is preordained, and you are doing your best to fulfill that mandate as the client directs. When you are in the realm, I think, of storytelling, and you are speaking more from the heart perhaps, and trying to open up worlds to people who would otherwise not see them. As a photographer, that's what we do. We go out into the world, we come back with visual explanations of what's going on out there. Then that, I think, is less reliant on camera skills. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to have them. They have to. It's like a computer program running in the back of your head. You know your f-stops and shutter speeds. But what comes and dominates the foreground of your thinking and your presence is, how do I relate to this other human being or group of human beings or this situation? How do I fit in? How do I tell this story in a heartfelt and accurate way? How am I fair-minded about this? I have to work hard. I have to be nimble. I have to anticipate. All those very human things are what dominates that type of sphere or space when you're operating there.
Absolutely. And our final question, this is from Alan. What shot do you still have to get?
There's lots of them. There's lots of them. I have some projects in my head. We're discussing things now. We're having preliminary production things. It would be a video project. And so fingers crossed, that there are still a few pictures out there that I'd love to get and will hopefully see, in fairly short order. Right now, we're all on pause, and we'll see which way all of this spins, hopefully to the better.
And so people can keep up to date with what you're doing. It was a question earlier. Sorry, I can't remember who asked it. But you do have a blog, which you post regularly to, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so they can find that at joemcnally.com, I assume, as well.
Yep, absolutely. I'm on Instagram, Joe McNally Photo on Instagram.
Yeah.
And we maintain a regular presence, in those kinds of channels. It's a fun sort of avenue to put out, things that we're doing or have done. Yeah,
excellent. So that's the place to head to find out more. So there we go. Only 30 minutes overrun. That's not bad, is it?
Chatty son of a gun. Sorry, Dave.
It's mostly my fault. So, but as I said, everyone's still here, so it's all good. So once again, thanks for joining us, Joe, and spending an hour and a half of your valuable time with us all today as well. And we recorded everything, so if anybody missed anything or wants to watch it all over again and listen to us too, then it's going straight to YouTube as we speak, so you can pick it up immediately as soon as we've stopped chatting. So if you're a late joiner, it's going to be there straight away, and also on Facebook. So thanks again, Joe. And what time is it for you now? It's lunchtime for you, dinner time for me, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks back to Capture One. Thanks to you in particular, David, for orchestrating all of this, and again, being a good friend and a teacher.
Pleasure. Thanks again, Joe, and we will talk very soon, no doubt.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye.